It's the book everybody's talking about. It's created a firestorm for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. The book is called Clinton Cash. It's going to be available on the book stands on next Tuesday, I believe it is, but you can pre-order probably through Amazon. In just a moment, we're going to talk to the man who wrote that book, and we'll ask him, where did all that cash come from?
Well, the book raises questions about the millions of dollars in foreign donations to the Clinton Foundation while Hillary was Secretary of State. Ephraim Graham has the story.
When Bill and Hillary Clinton left the White House 15 years ago, they say they had no money, owed millions, and didn't know how they'd pay for Chelsea's college education.
We came out of the White House not only dead broke, but in debt.
Since then, the Clintons have earned more than $130 million. Most people assume they've amassed their wealth through speaking engagements, where they collect fees as high as $750,000. But who pays and why? Peter Schweitzer's bombshell book, Clinton Cash, The Untold Story of How and Why Foreign Governments and Business Helped Make Bill and Hillary Rich, has people in Washington political circles and around the world talking about donations to the Clinton Foundation and what might be next.
Well, it's a fascinating book. It's called Clinton Cash, and the author's Peter Schweitzer. It's a pleasure to have him back with us on the 700 Club. Peter, welcome. Glad to see you.
It's great to be on with you always, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Hey, look, let's start talking about this foundation. When Bill Clinton left the White House, he formed a foundation. What was it? What was it all about?
Well, the Clinton Foundation is supposed to help people in economic development, deal with health issues around the world. So, you know, it started with this noble purpose, and it does do some good things. I'm not saying it doesn't do anything good. The problem is that they have really created these partnerships and have accepted money from some very, very troubling people. And they've also, frankly, hidden a lot of donations that they said that they were going to disclose. I think that's the real problem with the foundation.
Who's giving the money? Let me start with, how much money has the foundation gotten right now? Do you know what the net worth is?
Well, basically, Pat, from 2001 to the present, we're looking at about $2 billion, roughly $150 million a year they take in. And, you know, they get it from U.S. corporations, but in this book, I focused exclusively on foreign entities. That's foreign corporations, foreign businesses, foreign governments. And in a lot of cases, these are, you know, elites that are operating in very, very troublesome areas that have, you know, huge problems with human rights, corruption, and have long histories in those areas.
All right, now, when Hillary becomes Secretary of State, they make her sign an agreement that she will disclose funds going into to the foundation, and that they will not accept certain funds except that which has been disclosed. Talk about that for us.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. The Clinton Foundation says, we're the most transparent foundation out there. Well, they are because they were forced to, not by me or by conservative Republicans, but by President-elect Barack Obama. A condition for her becoming Secretary of State in early 2009 was that she agreed to disclose all contributions to the Clinton Foundation and that there be a process to vet donations that were coming in. The problem is that I point out in the book, they violated that agreement almost immediately. They took multi-million-dollar donations from foreign businesses that had interests before the State Department. Those were never disclosed. They have now come back and admitted that I'm correct, that those donations were not disclosed. But the problem is we don't know what we don't know, Pat. I mean, there was a report yesterday in the Washington Post and in Bloomberg that they admit there are more than 1,100 undisclosed donations, and that's what they're telling us. It could be even more than that.
You know, I'm head of a couple of charities, but I tell you, this is a shakedown racket. I have never heard of anybody being like a vacuum cleaner to get that kind of money. Is there an implied promise that either they will get access to federal government or there will be some sort of favors given by Bill or Hillary Clinton when people give that kind of money?
Well, I think certainly for some of them, there's this sense that giving a contribution to the Clinton Foundation is a retainer. In other words, that it's granting them access. And if you look at the pattern of conduct during her tenure as Secretary of State, it's very, very clear that you have a pattern repeated dozens of times, which is Hillary Clinton takes a position on an issue. There's an influx of maybe tens of millions of dollars, even more than $100 million in some cases. And then she ends up making a policy decision that is favorable to the people who have sent the money. And sometimes she is reversing course from the previous position that she had. The only thing that happens in between is there's this large influx of money. So it's a very troubling pattern that goes to the heart of what kind of decision she's making and why she's making them.
All right, well, let's talk about that one that's gotten the most publicity. This a fellow named Juster he's been in the mining business for some years, and he starts a little company called Eurasia, and they bid for the uranium rights in Kazakhstan. And in your book, you point out this is like a pipe dream. There's no way a little country like this is going to get it. But then President Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan wants to be recognized as a world leader by Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton embraces him. What is the nexus between Nazarbayev and Clinton and Justra?
It's a great question, Pat. I mean, the timeline is very clear. In September of 2005, Bill Clinton is in Kazakhstan with Frank Justra. Frank Justra wants to get these very lucrative uranium mining concessions. Bill Clinton says very nice things about Nazarbayev, says he's a great leader. He's got a great human rights record, which is ridiculous. It's a very, very repressive country and regime. Shortly after that, Frank Justra is given these lucrative uranium concessions. He has very little experience in the uranium business. Much larger companies, more experienced, that were bidding for them did not get them. And then weeks after that, Frank Justra sends more than $30 million to the Clinton Foundation. And that's the beginning of this path that ultimately leads to the Russian government itself owning 20% of the uranium in the United States.
Well, Justra now takes this company public. I think he goes out on the Vancouver Exchange. Canaccord Capital, you said it's the biggest deal they've ever done. So he gets, at that point, he gets to be enormously wealthy, right, with stock?
That's right. I mean, the estimates are that he made tens of millions. One estimate is he made $300 million off of this deal. And this company, this tiny company, Eurasia Energy, becomes something called Uranium One. And Pat, they start acquiring uranium assets in the United States to the point by 2010, they have 20% of all the uranium reserves, what's estimated to be 50% of production by 2015. And that's when the Russians come calling.
Well, now, the Russians want to build nuclear bombs, but they also want to have nuclear reactors. And the price of uranium has gone up because of the demand from China and so forth. And Putin has one of his guys start buying in. But in order to get that resource, they have to have the approval of the State Department. Now, what happened then?
Well, that's exactly right. So what you have is this uranium company that the Russians want to buy into. In order for that to happen, the State Department needs to sign off on it with some other government agencies. Hillary Clinton's foundation and her husband's foundation have nine shareholders involved in this Uranium One company that send a combined $145 million to the Clinton Foundation. This during the arc of this story. And Hillary Clinton and the State Department end up okaying this deal. And what's ironic about that, Pat, is she has a record on the issue of foreign governments owning critical industries in the United States, like uranium. She has a record of opposing these deals. But in this case, she actually comes out in favor of it.
Before it's finished, Putin and the Russians wind up getting 100% of the stock of Uranium One cleared by the State Department, which gives them access to 50% of America's uranium production. Was that the number?
Yeah, it was projected to be 50% when the deal went through in 2010. It is today 20% of all the uranium assets in the United States. And by the way, the Russians said that they would not export any of that uranium, but as the New York Times reported last Thursday, in fact, uranium that's owned by Uranium One in the United States has been exported to Canada and is ending up who knows where. So that fundamental question is U.S. uranium being used for nefarious purposes around the world? We don't know. That's a very scary prospect.
Well, you know, you covered the waterfront on this, from Pacific, Rubiales to all the rest of it, but let's go to Haiti. Bill Clinton became like the economic czar of Haiti, and they have a telephone company down there, and it's very lucrative because those Haitians are calling the United States all the time to talk to their friends and relatives. What was the deal on that? How did the Irish O'Brien get his hands on that?
Yeah, you know, again, you have this nexus of relationship of wealthy foreign investors, in this case, an Irish gentleman named Dennis O'Brien, who has business interests in Haiti. The earthquake happens. There is a very generous rush to put aid in the in Haiti from the United States, including billions of dollars in taxpayer money. And the problem is that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton make a series of decisions in Haiti on reconstruction that end up benefiting some of the biggest contributors to the Clinton Foundation, including Dennis O'Brien. They set up this mobile financial system that operates through the telephone system, which is, by the way, owned by Dennis O'Brien. Dennis O'Brien is a multi-million-dollar contributor to the Clinton Foundation. He has facilitated speeches by Bill Clinton, paid for a speech for him in Jamaica. And in return, the Clintons set up this system of money transfers, which puts, you know, tens of millions of dollars in the pocket of Dennis O'Brien's company and makes him even wealthier. It's crony capitalism on steroids, and it's using the official powers of the State Department and U.S. taxpayer money to help make their benefactors even wealthier.
Peter, these speeches, now, I think Clinton, didn't he go to Ireland and make a speech at like 750 grand? I mean, you got to say some pretty wonderful words to get paid that kind of money for a speech.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, Pat. You know, like most ex-presidents, Bill Clinton hit the lecture circuit, and we expect that. But something happened in 2009. When Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State, his speaking fees, particularly from overseas interests, went up threefold, sometimes fourfold. He got huge, big paydays from foreign entities that had business before the State Department. There's only one or two ways to explain it. Number one, Bill Clinton all of a sudden got even more eloquent in 2009. Or these entities recognized the fact that by hiring him as a speaker, they could have access to his wife, who was going to make decisions that were very important to them. And there's a very troubling pattern there again. High speaking fees paid by somebody who had never sponsored him before. Hillary Clinton, shortly after, takes favorable action for the benefit of those entities.
You know, Peter, the average person, myself among them, would be absolutely shamed out of our mind if we had done stuff like this. They don't seem to have any shame, do they?
I think they seem to believe that they are doing such good and virtuous things that the rules don't apply to them, and that it's okay for them to cash in. It's okay for them to take large contributions from people in Africa that deal with warlords, that deal with very troubling human rights situations, with people that have criminal records and have been charged and convicted in courts around the world for various crimes. I think they believe that they are so good and virtuous that it doesn't matter that they're doing those things. That's the only explanation I can come to.
By the way, their daughter Chelsea bought a $10 million apartment in New York. Where did she get the money for that?
Well, the Clintons have done very, very well in the post-presidential years. We expect that ex-presidents are going to take in some money, but it's been remarkable. And when you look at the pattern of who is paying them and why, look, the Clintons are very shrewd people. They've been called a lot of things over the years. Naive is not one of them. They have to know why people are throwing money at them, and it doesn't seem to bother them, and it allows them to to live beyond their wildest dreams as far as wealth is concerned.
Are you having threats against your own person because of your expose?
I'll just say, Pat, that I do have security now. That's happened as a result of the book. It was not something that actually I pushed for, but was encouraged by other individuals because of various things going on. And I'll just leave it at that.
Well, Peter, it's a fabulous book. The research is exhaustive, ladies and gentlemen. It will stand up to scrutiny if anybody wants to attack it. Page after page after page of research documentation. It has, we're talking about African warlords. We've got Colombian oil concessions, timber concessions. We've got things all over the world. And all of the deals somehow flow back into the Clintons to get a little piece of the action. It's a fascinating book. It'll be... Peter, it'll be available, I think, Tuesday on the book stands.
Yeah, you can pre-order it online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, but yes, it'll be in bookstores on Tuesday, May 5th.
Well, it's a hot seller, and thank you so much for being with us. It's a fascinating read. Appreciate your work.
Thank you so much, Pat. I appreciate it.
Well, you can find it more on our website, cbn.com. Terry, isn't that interesting?
What impact do you think this will have on her political aspirations?
I think it'll destroy him. I just don't think you can get away with it. I mean, for example, taking money from people that oppress women, taking money from a corrupt killer in Nigeria, for example, taking money from Aristide and his buddies in Haiti. I mean, it goes down the list. And
the fascinating thing to me, not fascinating, but maybe shocking, is all this from people who belong to a party that purports to have the heart and the compassion for the poor.
Yeah, you put your finger on it. I mean, it's elitism.
You just shake your head.
Elitism on steroids. Yeah, if you've got a daughter, I mean, to tell you, I mean, I think the prices in New York are outrageous, but nevertheless, $10 million for an apartment for your daughter.
Yeah, well,
oh my goodness, $10 million.
Buyer beware, huh?
Well, buyer beware, but I mean...
I don't mean the apartment, I mean the voter.
Yeah, well, I think if they vote, it'll just be insanity. But this book is, I think, aimed at the heart. And so it's back to the old attack. It's really a hit piece by the right wing and all this kind of stuff. It's too well documented. Peter's a good guy. Okay.
A group of prominent Christian leaders is issuing a warning to the Supreme Court. If it legalizes gay marriage, they're promising to defend traditional marriage and practice civil disobedience. Caitlin Burke reports.
The Supreme Court will soon make a decision on same-sex marriage. Two big questions are being considered. First, do same-sex couples have a constitutional right to marry? And second, if they do not, must states with marriage bans recognize same-sex marriage licenses from other states?
As of today, only 11 states have chosen to enact same-sex marriage. But if the Supreme Court says it's a constitutional right, we'll have it in all 50. That means 39 states will have the will of the people overturned.
In a document titled Pledge in Solidarity to Defend Marriage, Christian leaders say they'll continue to defend traditional marriage, even if it means civil disobedience.
The pledge reads in part, "While there are many things we can endure, redefining marriage is so fundamental to the natural order and the common good that this is the line we must draw and one we cannot and will not cross." Todd Starnes of Fox News reports that many well-known Christian leaders have signed the pledge, including former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, former U.S. Senator Rick Santorum, and Franklin Graham, president and CEO of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and Samaritan's Purse. James Dobson of Family Talk Radio is also involved in the pledge. He tells Starnes that marriage is fundamental, and that, quote, "it's the foundation for the entire culture. It's been in existence for 5,000 years. If you weaken it or you undermine it, the entire superstructure can come down. We see it as that important." Analysts and Christian leaders warn that legalizing same-sex marriage could be a direct threat to religious freedom. For instance, if the Supreme Court rules that same-sex marriage is a constitutional right, the government could eventually take away the tax-exempt status of religious organizations that don't agree with gay marriage.
We're already seeing cases around the country in places where there is same-sex marriage, where a Christian who bakes wedding cakes or prints announcements or rents out a hall for receptions may violate state law or local law if they don't want to promote a gay ceremony. This could go even further.
The Supreme Court's ruling is expected to come down in June, but these Christian leaders aren't waiting until then to make their positions clear. They say that traditional marriage is the cornerstone of modern civilization, and it has to be defended. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Thanks, Caitlin. Well, you can find out more about this story, including a copy of the marriage pledge, at cbnnews.com. Well, most Americans think religious freedom should take priority over gay rights, according to a new Associated Press poll. By a margin of 56 to 40%, Americans say the government needs to protect religious liberties when they conflict with gay rights. Nearly half call religious liberties very or extremely important to them personally, compared to just a quarter who say gay rights are very or extremely important to them. Pat?
I met with the Archbishop of New York some years ago, and we were talking about Georgetown University, where the city of Washington was insisting that Georgetown provide a special place for gays, special telephones for them, special printing, special everything for them, despite the fact that the Catholic Church is totally against homosexuality. And this wasn't gay marriage, it was just homosexuality. And I said to him, if you were in charge of that school, what would you do? And he looked at me and he said, I'd close the place down. I mean, it was just amazing, but they don't feel that way any longer. But the Washington, D.C. said our laws about gay rights trump your religious beliefs. Now, that was decades ago. Think what it'll be now. You disagree with gay marriage, you lose your tax-exempt status. You disagree, you'll be hounded. You give $10 to a proposition dealing with the defense of marriage, and you suddenly are the victim of hate speech and hate activity, and you are denied the ability to work. It is a vendetta. Believe me, it's getting ready to happen. But you go back to the Bible, you look at Sodom and Gomorrah. When Lot was living in Sodom and Gomorrah, he tried to defend some angels that were there because the men wanted to have sex with those angels. And they said, look, who do you think you are? You've come to live among us, and you're going to do it our way or else, and we want those angels, bring them out to us so we can, quote, have sex with them. That was Sodom and Gomorrah. Who was on top? Who was controlling things? Well, it was the homosexuals. But who had the last word? It was God Almighty when he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. John?
Pat, some good news amid the destruction in Nepal. A teenager was found alive after being buried for 5 days under the rubble of the 7.8 magnitude earthquake. Crowds in Kathmandu cheered today as the 18-year-old was pulled from the wreckage. The young man was rescued after workers heard his cries for help. Despite that bit of good news, the need for help remains great. The death toll in Nepal is now above 5,500 and still climbing. Operation Blessing is on the scene, distributing food and installing 2 community water stations in rural communities about 45 minutes outside of Kathmandu. And more water systems are on the way. Pat, great need in the midst of so much suffering.
Well, I'm pleased to report that CBN International is on the scene with relief supplies. We're working there to get water, to get blankets, to get tents, to get tarps, to get medicine, to get all the things they need so desperately. It's a huge tragedy. Is that whole part of the country is broken apart. I've explained to you the tectonic earthquake, you know, the morphology of this earth, what goes on. But if you're living there, it doesn't matter some scientific explanation. You're hurting, you're suffering, and you're starving, and you're cold, and you need help. And so we're sending it to them, and we ask you to help us so that we can help others. So it's telephone number, CBN, 1-800-759-0700 or cbn.com, and we can call that disaster relief.